Perfect. So I do officially have a new title. I've had a new title since I want to say August. I am no longer the Eclipse Partnership Coordinator. It's taken me a little bit of work to actually not say that every time I introduce myself. Something about having that title for 3 years and saying it again and again and again kind of got stuck in my head. I'm officially now the Community Engagement Manager. So I'm now within the education department at the RMSC, but oh, am I still within the astronomy world? I do want to start off tonight by honestly thanking ASRAS. We couldn't have pulled off a lot of the last 3 years without a lot of your help. A lot of you have volunteered at telescope evenings. You helped spread the word. A handful of you did talks when I was in too many, couldn't be in too many places at once. And I really greatly appreciate that. It was a massive effort, and I really deeply appreciate ASRAS and all the help. You'll probably be getting me as an official member sooner than later. Tonight, I kind of wanted to talk about, what does this post-eclipse world look like? And looking towards the future, partially as RMSC and partially as the Rochester community. So I do want to mention a few things, since this is the first time back, about the impact that the eclipse had on the community. A lot of you did attend our stakeholder meetings, and to give you an idea, we ended up having 18 stakeholder meetings starting in 2019, which if you were to add up every attendee, whoever attended any single one session, we had over 700 attendees over the 4.5 years. 4.5, 5. And here's what happens when you run all of these meetings. You end up with, well, events everywhere. And this map does not even show it. The plugin stopped adding dots, I think, after 50. We really had over 100 viewing events leading in on the day of the eclipse, and a few events leading up to it as well. It was incredible. There was something for everyone. And it just covered a lot. There was so much done in the lead up. I'm not going to go into all the details. I do love pointing out, yes, we had all of the astronomy themed beers and wine and distilled drinks. There was a lot of merch made, a lot of art. I love that the Rochester Red Wings became the Rochester Moon Rocks. There was contests. You could see astronomy in parades. The gingerbread house exhibit that they do every year at the George Eastman Museum, and even at the Rochester Airport. It is wild when you go around Rochester and all you see is astronomy. On the outreach side, we do still have these giant glasses, and our current plan for these is actually to clean them up and hopefully deploy them, because we still have sunspots. I still love showing people the sun, as a lot of you do as well. They're fully usable. We do still have our inflatable sun. I love this photo from when we did a day at the Rochester Red Wings, and just even seeing it, our giant suns go everywhere. It was incredible getting to introduce so many people to the eclipse, to thinking about space, everything from, hockey, which we did here at RIT. We're already talking about next season, so not the 24-25 season, but the 25-26 season of coming back. We're already talking, hopefully, we hope to be back at the Red Wings this year, and it's just wild at all the different events, fairs, events. Wherever people were, we went. Wherever there were non-science-based events, we tried to be there as well. I don't have my 2024 graphic yet, and one of the things I need to create in the next probably week or so is a Eclipse overall by the numbers, starting from probably 2021 all the way through 2024. But this popped up on my feed again, and I'm like, I should just include it. At the end of 2023, just in that year, we ordered 70 telescopes and gave away 60 of them. I will personally say moving all of those telescopes is a pain. If you ever have questions about bulk ordering, please let me know. It is a lot of fun. We did about 108 talks and outreach events, so that averaged out to almost one every 3 days. We met around 55,000 people, and we ordered 500,000 glasses. As a quick note, if you have any glasses that need to be recycled, I am not taking. I have been told to never take another pair of Eclipse glasses, ever. But if you want some, please let me know. I will get them for you. I actually have about 10,000 in my car right now to be shipped to Quebec. I need to just hit up FedEx tomorrow morning. They have a deep partial, I want to say in late March. So it's great that they're using them. Here's kind of a quick look at some of the outreach events. I know some of you are actually in these photos. As we mentioned, starts with Santa. I still say I love putting Eclipse glasses on Santa. Just one of those fun things that I had to do. Of course, there was a lot of art. Please feel free to take posters at the end of tonight's session. I do know that Tyler Nordgren, the artist, is working on new space posters. And if you want to travel with him, just reach out. And I know he's already booked for the 2026 Eclipse, and I think already for 2027 as well. There was a lot of art, there was a lot of music, a lot of theater. Out of curiosity, how many people attended the RPO Eclipse concert? A handful of people? Rumor has it, I've been chatting with them, they're thinking about bringing it back in a few years. It's something about having their record-breaking concert. They had 7,200 attendees at that event. And for the first time, they sold out the Blue Cross Arena. There was a bunch of other events. I still love the alpaca wearing Eclipse glasses, the corn maze. It was incredible that you couldn't go anywhere in Rochester without running into one thing or another. I am very curious about the behind the scenes of that alpaca. Some of you probably know about the ambassador program that we ran for the last couple of years. The idea was to decentralize and ensure that every community in Rochester had, the right tools, the right information about the Eclipse. We brought on 50 organizations from across the 9-county region, gave all of them, and this is what some of the breakdown was, religious orgs, museums, after-school programs, all of that. And to give you an idea, they were really spread out. I think I had to zoom out even more to get this photo. And it doesn't even show the OWL libraries, which also participated. Every single one of them received their own telescope, their own solar filter, 1,000 glasses, and all sorts of additional things. I am happy to say I have yet to receive any of these telescopes back, and I've heard word that a number of them have been running their own stargazing parties. That was one of the biggest concerns going into this, as we don't want to see telescopes just kind of stored away in closets. Though if you have any ideas of what to do with colanders, please let me know. I still have about 20 in my office. That's a lot of pasta. And here is some of the training sessions that we ran with these ambassadors. And at the end of the program, out of those 50 ambassadors, 43 Eclipse on the day of the event. We had 43 viewing locations. A number of them actually partnered together. About 20,000 attendees between all of those programs. That's the conservative number. When you started adding in all of the parts that we had, they couldn't keep track, and that's where the number would have exploded. 50,000 glasses were distributed between those ambassadors, and we were surprised that, 48 news articles were published over a year just on the ambassador program, including some national news coverage, as some of them had partnered up together. And just here are some of my favorite photos from them. And then This was just a wonderful quote. I don't want to read it out loud, but it was just very heartwarming to hear this experience. So, of other Eclipse things to be on the lookout for, there's still one documentary that we are waiting to be released. Some of you might have heard that Science Sandbox did a documentary where they joined us originally on April 8th, 2023, and spent the day with us. I actually know that they interviewed Steve that day. Lots of running around. They came back to visit a couple of times and joined us on April 8th, 2024. Supposedly it's going to come out this year. And once it does, we will make sure that everyone knows. There's also a book covering Eclipse efforts, Eclipse organizing efforts nationally and internationally, being written by Jamie Carter and Deborah Ross. Deborah Ross is local and was one of the co-chairs of the Eclipse community. Jamie Carter, he is the Eclipse writer on Forbes. He does all astronomy articles on Forbes. And I think he wrote over 400 articles about the eclipse over 2 years. So I wanted to talk for a brief moment about the impact of May 10th and October 10th with the auroras. I don't think we could have gotten luckier having that back-to-back with the eclipse. That was just one of those incredible experiences. And, this is my photo, but there is one photo that I wish I could have taken, and that would have been of the people in attendance. I'm kind of curious. I'm guessing almost everyone here went out on one of those nights. How many people did you see? I would estimate there had to be at least 1,000 across all of Lake Ontario, just on the various beachfronts. I went out to Webster. I partially missed the May 10th one because I had read that it was going to, spike at midnight, and I went to sleep to wake up at midnight. Bad move. Learned my lesson for October 10th. But this proves that Rochester has a strong thirst for experiencing astronomy, for a deep passion for space. I could not believe how many people were out that night. And we're still in a pretty good point in the cycle. We might get another one of them. For which, if you do, I would start selling hot cocoa or something at any of the parks. That would definitely be the way to go. So here's the question that I'm been, left thinking about, which is how do we continue Rochester's excitement about space? We've just had a really big year. The fact that we had hundreds of thousands of people all looking up throughout the year, between the eclipse, between the auroras, there's just been this continuous excitement. I was also working the Stars with Santa event, and I don't know how many people asked me about telescopes and binoculars. I told them, please go with binoculars. But there is this excitement in the air that we need to make sure continues. So one of the things that we're doing is we've been lucky enough, thanks to not only the Simons Foundation, which funded the Eclipse Ambassadors, but Amazon, and we are now part of the NASA New York Space Grant Consortium to continue our ambassadors, at least for the next 2 years, and to some extent for the next 4 with a much smaller number. So this is, that mission statement, and I'll skip this, but we have, instead of going with 50 organizations, whittled it down to about 15. 50 was an incredible number. That was a lot of organizations to organize and a lot of materials to coordinate. So we now have this new list of 15 organizations representing a good chunk of Rochester. And for 2025, they'll be focused on astronomy. They already have the telescopes. We just have to, remove the solar filter for some of the time. They can still do a lot of solar observing, and we're heavily encouraging it. But we want them to explore more at night and to try out new things. One of the big things that we are, going to be having them talk about, of course, Artemis. Though when we originally wrote the grants, Artemis 2 is going to be taking place in theory. But one of our bigger ideas is we want to continue what the Eclipse brought, which was a lot of community stargazing all at once, having everyone celebrate by looking up on the same night. And so we are proposing that October 4th is a region-wide star party with as many locations as possible. We want telescopes everywhere, at parks, at schools, at community centers. We don't want to see those telescopes go to waste. I know personally, and this is very budget dependent in the future, I hope to make this a regular event in Rochester. Of the topics, just in case anyone's curious, here's just a smidge of what they'll be learning. I'm going to be teaching a fairly decent breadth of, hey, here's what you can actually do with it. What's really nice is they already have at least some baseline using their telescopes. Unfortunately, the one thing I honestly miss and I do regret is that I never got them to do stargazing at night. I only had them focused on one star. Lesson learned. But, we're going to be heavily focused on the moon, heavily focused on what else can be found, Rochester's connections, getting them involved in citizen science projects. I've been tinkering with a few solutions on what to do if it's cloudy to try and replicate at scale. I'm working on taking that classic model of taking a slide and a little light bulb behind it and making a digital version where you can just upload via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi to a small screen. That way you can start playing around with multiple views very quickly. And then all of these ambassadors will be receiving a lot of materials. Sure, I'm not giving them another telescope, but I'm kind of filling in the gaps from the first time that we worked with all of them. From, binoculars, which I do deeply regret not giving all of them early on. More ORIs, inflatable moons, step ladders, yet again, something I regret not giving them. We are giving them a few kind of slightly shiny things between, inflatable projection screens and projectors. The idea is so that they can give, lessons in the hour before sunset. And then, of course, just a lot of swag and merchandise. I went through so many Eclipse stickers last year. And then we eventually did Eclipse temporary tattoos, and we went through so many of those. One thing that I would love to hear from folks is I also have an additional book budget for every ambassador, and I am currently in the process of figuring out which books to give to each of these organizations. Most of them have no STEM background. They have, some from the Eclipse. Some of them maybe do some elementary school STEM projects, but that's about it. And the idea is not only to provide a lot of the science, but some of the history and cultural aspects as well. Now for the Artemis missions, and I really should add a, quotation marks around April in 2027. It was fun back in December watching the press announcement live, and the first couple words out of the NASA administrator's mouth was "space is hard." That's a great sign of a press conference. We knew exactly what was going to happen from there. So I want to start off asking the question here: who here remembers any of the moon landings? Watching them live. That's good. Here's the fun thing. I was going over the US population demographics. About 80% of all US citizens alive right now were either too young or just born afterwards. I am in that group. I would put my mom in barely the group that just remembers it. It's one of her earliest memories. Otherwise, all of us were just born too late. And, how did people watch? A lot of people watched at home. There was a few watch parties that I've been able to track down through the New York Times. This is both out of New York City in 69. My guess would be that one is Central Park. And then I believe this is Rockefeller Center, which is wild. I am still very curious about how they set up those screens back then. I also wanted to point out that the Hayden Planetarium in 1969 did a live splashdown projection, which is just incredible. I did have to include the DNC's, not the best image I could grab, but still one of them, DNC's coverage. This article I actually found with an interview with Steve about the astronaut drive that took place in Irondequoit. This was just wild. I didn't know about this until this past week of how someone in Irondequoit wanted to recreate their own lunar module. And they had a lot of people drive by. And then it made me think, we actually have someone doing something very similar over the last couple years, originally to celebrate the 50th anniversary, but still brings it around with the lunar half-scale lunar lander. I've been chatting with him. He actually is thinking about building a new one to hopefully match with Artemis. I also wanted to share, we did something really fun here in Rochester in 1970. About a year after the moon landing, one of the moon rocks went on tour. And in true Rochester fashion, and I have to say, this makes me feel that the RMSC has had a history of space puns for way too long, since the very beginning of holding a concert, Moon Rock Rock. I am sure if we were to do that today, it would be Moon Rock Rock Rocks with ROCS. But this was just fantastic, and I was able to grab this this little bit from the Daily Messenger from Canandaigua about the event, for which I still love this poster design. So, in addition to having the moon rock on display, they had a rock concert as well.
Can I add something?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Video, people has left. And Voice of America was actually promoting this to the rest of the world. Now the Antique Wireless Museum in Bloomfield, they have Voice of America display there. So that was the way people in other part of the world learned about moon landing, because people didn't have TVs at that time. It was still on tube radio. It's
wild just how many people experienced the moon landing across the world at once. It's wild thinking about what events take place today that have that same impact.
US Embassy had a special display of John Glenn when he first went in space. So in American Embassy was showing that.
Wow.
We have
yes.
I'm curious, is the moon lander, is it what's the scale?
Half scale.
You talked once about donating it to you guys. Did he ever get back to you about that?
He's still bringing it on tour. I saw it back in late November here at RIT. It was at the Maker Fair in the field house.
I actually had it at one of our staff.
It is amazing how well that thing travels. He has it down to a science. It's incredible. So Here's the question. What does the next moon landing look like? And it's really the next generations. A lot of folks might remember as I gave my Eclipse talks, I knew exactly how old my daughter would be to the day for when the eclipse would happen and her whole experience. One thing that I've done the math for in the last in the last year or so is I figured out my daughter's going to be the same age my mom was when she first watched the moon landing. And it really is that generational story. And if I'm lucky, they'll get to celebrate it and watch it together. But, we'll see what that looks like in quote unquote 2027. And, when I think about how do we get the public excited, I'm going back to the Eclipse playbook. There's so many things that we can go out into the public and do. We can do art contests. We can talk about music. We can talk about songs. I've actually chatted with the Rochester Red Wings saying, hey, don't get rid of too many of those Moonrock jerseys. You have another chance to use them just a few years later. So that could always come back. A lot of, I hate to say it, those moon pies, I'm sure people are going to be using again as a snack. I'm sure they'll taste just as good as they would today as they will in a few years, which is to say, nope. I've been thinking about what does a public display look like, and I looked to COSI, another brilliant science museum, and they have this 10-foot model that can travel. It's mostly built out of construction tubes and some 3D printing. And I just absolutely love this model. There's an idea that I've been tossing around with a few other science museums across New York State of what does a celebrating the moon area at the New York State Fair look like? What could we all work on together? A crazy idea that, who knows if this will ever get done is technically you could do a one-to-one model if you were to just print it out flat on vinyl. Just do it in rows like a giant grid. Should only cost about $5,000 to $10,000, but you would have a model that you could walk around, and if you got enough organizations working together, that covers a lot. So there are ways that we can basically tap back into what we did for the eclipse, but for the moon landing. I know I've, in the back of my head, been thinking about what does a moon landing festival even look like? It's basically the Rock the Eclipse Festival, except for a lot more screens. I don't have to worry about people looking up. I also have less weather concerns, which I'm really, really happy about. Lesson learned. But there's a couple concerns that come with what does events look like. In general, there's public engagement is going to get a lot of fun with Artemis 2 and 3. It's the same things that we deal with already, just probably amplified. Misinformation, delays, including weather delays. There was a lot of issues with Apollo 11 with the general public, if you remember what 1968 and 1969 were like in the US. And if you were to look at the Apollo missions after 11, well, it comes down to how NASA originally marketed Apollo 11. They went for a goal, which was to go back to the moon, and they made it to go to the moon and made that final step. A lot of the public stopped caring after we got to that step. I'm currently in the middle of a book of it's a book covering how NASA tried to market space missions post Apollo 11, which heavily covers the shuttle system, all the shuttles, the different space stations, and what does that whole making that exciting to the public look like. On the festival side, this is a logistics nightmare because at any point you have to scrub. That means any speaker you have has to be local. Any performing group has to be ready to go at a different date. In theory, it could be across, a few months. Fingers crossed. But it means a lot of people are going to continuously be on call. And that comes with its other complications of, well, what happens if everything's late at night? When it took place in 1969, it was at just before 11 p.m., if I'm to remember correctly, that a lot of kids had to be woken up. I worry about what happens if it's during the school day. Hopefully schools play it. You never know when those pesky either state standard or testing takes place. What would you rather have a kid do? Standardized testing or watch the moon landing? It's new fun questions. I know from my perspective, what happens if the moon landing takes place during a wedding? I don't know if I can bump the wedding. I mean, I've had people get married. I had someone get married at the Eclipse Festival, which was a surprise to us because they didn't tell us. Of course, that means they got a free wedding at it, but there's other issues. And the one issue that we didn't have with the Eclipse, if we want to watch it, we're going to have a serious bandwidth issue at any event site. Streaming video, and with as many screens as possible, that means we're going to have to hardwire a lot of things. We're going to have Wi-Fi issues. There's just other infrastructure. And if we were to do any outdoor viewing locations, yet again, we're down to weather. Thankfully, Rochester still puts up with it. As long as it's not heavy rain or heavy wind, we're fine. And then one of the other things in the back of my mind, the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope. How do I get the public excited about this? I know here in Rochester, I was able a couple years ago to track down when we had a 1-to-1 scale of JWST. I do not remember coming to Rochester as a teen, but there are the photos of it, which is incredible. We got a lot of people interested via art a couple years ago when it originally launched, and we get incredible photos. What happens with Roman? I know some people are starting to work on Roman merch here in Rochester. We can brag. We should be bragging. It was here in Rochester. A couple of us at the RMSC were lucky enough to go and visit it, which was wild.
And they just shipped it out. Elbry Harris just shipped it in July to NASA or wherever. I think a C5 came here to pick it up. So too bad that could not have been publicized somehow with video, but I don't think it made much news.
I think it made some news after the fact, which I'm wondering if that was due to security concerns, which we couldn't publicize that we got to go visit it, and we weren't allowed to take any photos, which I really wish we could have. A couple of us are talking about, hey, how could we start 3D printing models of this? Which I believe the 3D printed model is available. But just to give people a tangible idea of what it looks like. And with that, I kind of wanted to ask folks here today, how do you think we can get the wider public interested in astronomy and, either looking up in the Artemis missions and any of the upcoming telescope missions? There's a lot to be covered. And there's a lot of interest. So I wanted to pick people's brains here. Any initial thoughts?
Have you tried the Solar Quest mount with Heliofine? It's a $500 solar mount that just finds the sun and tracks it.
I have not.
So we have one here with ASRAS so far. I think we're going to try to get another one. But in my eyes, that is one of the best instruments to do outreach with because it's during the day. You don't have to worry about safety issues. It's it can be taken somewhere and it finds the sun and keeps the sun in the view
Mhm.
so that you don't have to constantly be making adjustments between people, so you can get more people views. So that's one thing that we're looking at as, we have one so far, and we're looking at getting another, or maybe more than that.
That is one of my favorite things that I got to do was bringing. I love the fact that it automatically tracks it and the fact that you don't have to readjust after every third person,
Yeah.
which got to be a lot of fun. Over 2023, getting to bring telescope with solar filters to the public was just incredible. A lot of people, didn't believe it. There's always an excitement about a person's first time looking through a telescope that you never get tired of. We just have to make sure that it's brought out to the to very public places. I would love to do the Lilac Festival on one of the weekend days. We did Cornhill, we did Fairport Canal Days. You can get a lot of people through a telescope at one of those public events. And, we know phases. We can always go solar. We know phases of the moon. So I think about Harborfest that's coming up. And they just announced the dates. I want to say it's June, July. They do a night regatta or a night parade of boats. That's the perfect time and the perfect location to bring out a couple telescopes. It's just a matter of making sure that it's in the wider public.
We call it sidewalk. Okay.
Sidewalk, yep.
Example, we did solar right purpose sidewalk. So we got to turn it. We didn't go right permissions. That's the opening you have.
Yes.
To do that. But that's what sidewalk is. Take where there's a lot of people and blocks on it.
We actually already have some new signage ready to be printed to help out with some of that. Just saying sidewalk astronomy and a little area where we can say what we're viewing that day.
It'd be really great if perhaps RMSC could advertise some of our open houses.
I will.
Like the open houses we have at our observatory and our public observing sessions.
I will bring that up to both our marketing folks and then to Jim Bader, the director of the planetarium. If we were to almost get a list of them for a whole bunch of them in a row and get a postcard and some other ways to promote it, yes.
That would be wonderful. Because the Science Center and the Astronomy Club need to work with each other.
Oh, yes. That is why we're here. And we did a lot of good work together over the last couple of years.
Yeah, when we talk about moon landings and things, are we U.S. focused here? Because there may be other countries.
U.S. and Canada. So one of the things that, admittedly, I am a little bit jealous that Buffalo got to do is they got to have one of the Canadian astronauts. The reason why NASA was in Buffalo and Niagara Falls is heavily because of that Artemis partnership, where I do not know how many times they had to go back and forth over the border, but they were going back and forth between both sides of the falls all that weekend. I am unfortunately forgetting his name, but yes, we are talking about some of the international
landing thing.
Yes.
The question is, which events are you going to pick? You've got international potential, you've got private potential with Musk.
Yep.
People like this. So what do you envision doing? All of them or just US based and Canadian based missions?
Probably to start just the US Canadian and mostly focused on Artemis 2 and 3 to start, just because we haven't had someone back on the moon since 72.
I'd like to sound a note of caution. I think it might be a small mistake, put all your eggs into several years worth of building up to a moon landing, because there's a 5, 10, 15% chance that the program gets canceled. And then
that is why we are not all in on it. And that's why it's only a subsection of the ambassador program. and why we're looking at other means of getting people excited.
So in that vein, the Nancy Roman telescope is also slightly risky because there's a chance that it doesn't watch properly. LSST is another opportunity for you to get people excited about space, and that's lower risk because it's a ground-based telescope. It's much less likely that it has some sort of horrible failure.
Yes.
So you might want to add LSST and its very large data volume into your ideas for outreach events.
Yes.
I understand it's less exciting to talk about a ground-based telescope than one in space.
That's one of the great things about the ambassador program is that they know their own community and they know how to pitch it. Once we give them some of that background knowledge of finding the different connections, that's where we're going. And I mean, I'm already feeling a little bit of that. I budgeted for every ambassador to receive their own mini model of the SLS. I don't know if I should buy it right now. I'm going to at least wait another 6 months before deciding if we go with SLS models. If anyone has bought the Lego SLS model, that could become a collectible. Which is a whole nother realm of getting the public excited. I swear, those Lego space kits they're a good way to get kids and adults in.
I want to make a comment about maybe depending on Artemis about not depending on it too much. Because there's other rockets also, like Falcon 9, Blue Horizon, and Starship.
Yep.
That you might want to include those as well and not just focus only on Artemis. Because it might get canceled.
Yes, and
not the rocket. We don't know if it's going to get canceled or not.
I mean, that's why we're not completely focused on the rocket, but more about the program in general of going back. Though we still have a concern about that being canceled as well. A lot of the grants were written late August. So we had to take some guesses.
About space probes? Parker Solar Probe just passed very close to the sun just the other day. We've got 2 rovers on Mars. We've got 3 spacecraft headed out towards Jupiter right now.
I am planning on the Europa mission being heavily included, especially as we approach, what is it, October? I think I might be off of my time frame. Yes, on the Parker probe, that's in the curriculum about the sun and getting them to talk about it. We are, of course, talking about the lunar eclipse, though I don't know how many people are going to be up at that hour of the wider public.
2 o'clock one?
Yeah, it is.
2 a.m.
In my opinion, the best part of that one is the date, just to say moon pie. That's it. I am probably going to be asleep during that one.
Well, what I like to try to do is I try to give a list of all the things that are up in space when I do outreach. And, to tell people, like, did you know that in the last year that there were 6 different attempts to land on the moon?
Yeah.
And we need to talk about ISS also. The ISS, in our, to tell everyone what to do. ISS hits close to you. If any of the debris from it lands, it happens. It happened with Mir.
Yep.
Back to what Dave was talking about our open houses. We've been recently kind of mulling over the idea of trying to get a bus funded because a lot of the people that might want to see our site don't have the transportation.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine the vet that combined the resources of the planetarium and our astronomy site that was linked by a bus that went from the RMSC parking lot after an RMSC program, bringing people down to our site for viewing at night and then bringing them back. The other thought I had was, does SpaceX ever offer funding for things? And would Starlink be a way of managing, if we can get funding from them to use Starlink, that might help with some of your bandwidth problems if it's operational.
Funny enough, I did look at Starlink as a solution during the eclipse in case of just thinking of backup problems. They don't sponsor.
Mhm.
You can get discounts, but not much. I did look into that. I do know some of the more remote eclipse viewing experiences use that, but they were also much more remote.
Mhm.
Figuring out hardwired systems worked out fairly well.
I'm guessing you're familiar with International Observe the Moon Night.
Yes.
Every time I've tried to do an event for that, it's been cloudy for 2 or 3 years straight.
That's one of the other issues. And I mean, that's why we're going to be talking about different solutions. That's why I'm playing with some tech about having, a small portable screen that I can rotate through images. The reason why I'm going digital is so that I can teach additional concepts without having to set up additional hardware. For example, I've done it inside, and I have a couple images to show various states of light pollution, even through a pair of binoculars, just to give people that experience of what it would be like in different situations. And then the hope is to, not quite mass produce it, but enough that I can bring it to multiple locations. I have been cursed by bad weather for enough public stargazing events, and that's why there's a couple models I look at for hands-on activities and other information to have. There's a really good sidewalk astronomy group out of Florida that I've been chatting with a lot, where they keep on expanding and have a very interesting business model where they do public sites and then they do a lot of private parties as well, and get people to basically pay for the public ones through that. But they have banners, they have a lot of hands-on activities, and they have multiple staff with like 5-10 telescopes at a site. If anyone has any recommendations afterwards, please feel free to reach out to me. If you have any recommendations on books, if you could get those recommendations in the next week before I start ordering everything. The only reason I've ordered anything so far is because there was a sale on orreries, and I was able to save like $200. When you start ordering a lot of any one item, you go for that sale the first second you have it. And always have storage in mind. If there's one of the lessons I wish I had learned earlier through the eclipse was how to store lots of things. Be it glasses, be it giant glasses, telescopes, all of that. That is its own storage issue.
I remember the first time I went into your office, one entire wall was sorted eclipse glasses.
Only one?
First time.
Yeah.
We got some small grant from IEEE. So
Mhm.
we have recreated the chip that went on the booth.
Mm-hmm.
So we recreated that, and we would like to place one in RMSC on a microscope.
I will have to introduce you to our exhibits folks.
We do outreach too,
Yes.
because it will attract students too. Thank you.
And that's one of those things where right now, one of the parts of my new position is that I'm going to festivals and events. Like that's the type of hands-on activity I would love to like share. And honestly, we're always looking for new things to do during our break weeks. Those are incredibly busy weeks, and we would love to invite people in to help run them.
And so we were already Calder Hall who actually discovered that chip and put it on the moon. And that was the first integrated circuit that went on the moon. So we got an original chip from a collector from Houston, Texas. So we reverse engineered and made it on AT. That's something that we would like to show off.
Question about that. if you make a display that goes in the museum, will you have a copy of the chip running a very simple interface so that people can see how slow it is compared to anything else they're used to using?
Yeah, we can run and with a not very high speed, but it shows that what kind of computer actually went on the moon at the time.
Yeah.
So we are connected into a function generator. We were showing that with the Rochester Engineering Exhibit. So, but to see that, compare that with quantum computer circuit, which was really very basic, So we just wanted to give away to museums to just a computer chip, then there's a small microscope, and it shows the structure of the chip. These 6 transistors, that's all.
I will introduce you to the head of exhibits. Yep.
Any questions from online?
Well, once again, thank you, and thank you again for all of the Eclipse work. I'll probably be in touch sooner than later with telescope viewing evenings outside the museum, as I'm really trying to get us out into the community. My catchphrase for it is have telescope will travel. So, thank you very much.